This week is different. This week we dive even deeper. A sweltering, sprawling consideration of care. And I'm really looking forward to thinking alongside with you. I don't trust that everything can be conveyed in the smoothness of eloquence. Something tells me that disruption is also generative. I want to just rush into something. Well, it's not a rushing, it's a slow stepping into something before I invite us to greet each other. I will get to what this means, but this is the title, the headline for today's exploration, When the Hospital Becomes Ill. I came across this author recently. Maurice Blanchot is probably one of the most fascinating writers and thinkers that I've come across in recent times. And he had a lot to say about absence and the outside and what Jean-Henri calls the passion of the impossible. Here's a quote from one of his texts that I want to read out in an attitude of contemplation, inviting you to think along with me as I read it out slowly. Every artist is linked to a mistake with which he has a particular intimate relation. There is the mistake of Homer, of Shakespeare, which is perhaps for both the fact of not existing. Every art draws its origin from an exceptional fault. Every work is the implementation of this original fault, from which come to us a new light and a risky conception of plenitude. I've considered these words in relation to other excerpts from his work. It seems Maurice was quite fascinated with absence and fault lines and notions of the impossible. I'm not quite sure what he might designate as a mistake here, what he means by a mistake. You can tell me what you think, especially if you start to get to read him as well, as I'm deeply interested in diving into his thinking. He was born in 1907, by the way, so he's quite an old thinker, continental thinker. But the idea of art drawing from a fault, right? Like a crack in reality. And that from there, this phrasing is so powerful, a risky conception of plenitude. The idea that there might be something else, right? I read another excerpt when he said the atheist is closer to God than the person who believes in God, right? And his invitation was that for the person who believes in God, God is too present. And if one is so present, you cannot love that thing because we constantly put a distance between us and that which we love. And so for Blanchot, the atheist loves God. To understand that should bring us to a consideration of form and force. I should say one of the philosophers that has become one of my guiding lights is Gilles Deleuze. And Gilles Deleuze was also inspired by Maurice Blanchot. And the way they spoke with each other through their texts was through a consideration of form and force. Think of form as the organizational integrity of things. And think of force as that which destabilizes form, right? That the world is this dance between form and force. Form is coherence, and force tugs at the sleeves of coherence, right? And this is how Blanchot thought about the outside. The outside is not an external space. It is a force that disrupts and challenges our established ways of thinking. The outside is not external. The outside is a force that is an exteriority within, right? The outside is the lurking, do I say poison? Poison has a pathological, is a pathological signifier in popular culture. So I wouldn't use poison except in the poetic sense, that the outside is counter-hegemonic. The outside is some kind of absolute zero. It's the impossibility of identity. It's the impossibility within. It's an absence within. It's disaster. It cannot be represented. It's not available for grasping. And yet it inheres everything. Every time you try to describe yourself, the outside winks, right? The outside is probably the reason you cannot surprise yourself in the mirror or scare yourself in the mirror, right? The outside lurks and pulls on the threads of form and destabilizes it. It describes the forces of destabilization reworking form from an exterior within. I really, really, really love that.